Yo, what is up? Good to see you. Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast. Glad you could join us. Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Danny Pommells, our producers in the cut, Ben Berry and Tom Finer. And we are coming to you live wherever you're listening to this, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We're at Rivers, right on door at Rivers. Of course, we're brought to you by Wilmington University, but here taking in all the revelry here as the holiday season gets underway. I saw a guy in a jacket looked like gift wrap and a Santa hat, like a reflective deal. Like it's some characters here, but come out and see us next time you're in the area, and we're here as well. We're here to talk some Sixers, of course, and Noah Levick, a 3-game winning streak begets a 3-game losing streak. Can't be more of an enigma than that as the Sixers welcome back James Harden in their most recent loss here in Houston. Wasn't a happy homecoming, that was for sure. But here we are as the Sixers are trying to figure things out. And I think talking about last night's game probably is where most people's heads are at right now as they lose in double OT. And it was a horrible shooting night for James Harden, 4 of 19 from the floor. Some tough decisions down the stretch that didn't go the Sixers' way. I think that's the most logical place to start. Is the game's tied. James Harden has the ball in his hand, and instead of going for a high percentage shot by trying to drive to the basket and maybe get fouled, because obviously 1 point will get you the lead and um, give you hopefully the game as well. He decides to go with a step back three, not even a pull up two or something of that ilk. He goes to the step back three, which is kind of a lazy way to go about trying to win the basketball game. It misses. The Sixers end up giving double OT. And Doc Rivers doesn't call a play, which is fine. You got these two, phenomenal guys in Embiid and Harden on the floor at the same time. But the soft pick and roll was kind of getting on my nerves. No, I wish there was just like a harder pick and then Embiid rolling to the basket. That maybe that's not his ilk or the way he operates, but it was frustrating for me last night watching that. I know you were a lot more subdued when you watched the games and not, yelling at the TV and things like that. But what did you see from Harden specifically last night, and what frustrated you or annoyed you about how things went?
Right. I don't think we expected him to be his best, but boy, it was just downright abysmal in almost every single important moment. And hey, he had the ball in his hands a lot.
Yeah.
And they played him 38 minutes in a double overtime game. You know, maybe the best play he made down the stretch was an extremely difficult step back three after he declined an open catch and shoot opportunity. So I think even the good moments, there were some concerning elements to note, but I think the start overall was a bit encouraging. We were reminded he's a great passer.
It was a great first quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, had an awesome little one-handed assist he flung to
Shake Milton,
a rolling Shake Milton, and I think you see that he does still attract a ton of attention and expand a lot of what the Sixers can do in terms of their pick and roll offense. Not only just the 2-man game with Embiid, but some of these 3-man screening actions and the double drag. Like, yes, Shake Milton, I think, has impressively expanded his passing arsenal, but he's not in James Harden's class there. And he looked good early. And I think at one point had 7 assists and 1 turnover. Ended up with 7 assists, 7 turnovers because
I knew that's the next thing you were going to say.
He failed to even execute just basic dribbling moves and made head-scratching decisions, if we're being generous, and just you figure fatigue was inevitably a factor for someone who hadn't played in over a month, and that rhythm and chemistry with his teammates would be problematic. But boy, I don't think anyone could have envisioned it would have been quite that poor from James Harden when the Sixers didn't need much to win this game, because Joel Embiid at the foul line down the stretch, really efficient offense. They just needed James Harden to be a little bit better, and he wasn't good. 4 for 19, I think, is only part of the story. I think the fact that he was 0 for 8 inside the arc isn't positive, and just the fact that the Sixers offense was often super stagnant, and of course their defense was terribly subpar after being the top defense in the NBA for 14 games at Harden. So not a lot that we can identify from this one other than that Harden is healthy and he did do a couple of nice things early in this game, but his performance late, yeah, that's a big reason the Sixers lost a very frustrating game in which they just didn't play very well and they didn't play as hard as the young Rockets.
Yeah, a team with the fourth worst record in the NBA who are in the lottery for sure this season. And even with all the talent that they have, the Sixers, you would think, have the veteran experience that would win out, but it's just very questionable decisions. And, we could hamper on, James Harden all we want. You can't let Joel Embiid off the hook. We'll get to him in a second because don't let the points fool you. He was some really bonehead, head scratching miscues down the stretch. But Harden defensively trouble keeping his man in front of him. Harden, with the turnovers as you mentioned, and it's funny that they play him 38 minutes because Rube here. Just taping the Eagle Eye podcast after us popped into the window. So you could do the same. You could come and pop in and heckle us through the window as well, but come out the rivers and check us out. But it's just head scratching to see them play him those 38 minutes because, you know, most guys do come back on a restriction of some sort, but they do play the double overtime game, so which begets more minutes. But at the same time, you're puzzled by the way the minutes were sparsed out because I, at the way things were going for the 76ers, Milton and Melton had really carried a lot of the load. You were hoping maybe for more balance and to work James in slowly. I mean, he is in Houston, so maybe Doc was giving him some veteran, benefit of the doubt to try to give him a chance to, show some spark in one of his former, stomping grounds. But it just didn't pay off 76ers, and it was tough to watch, specifically just the lack of awareness and focus, it seemed like, when it mattered most for them.
Yeah, I think they fell down 9 points and they finally realized the defensive effort and focus needed to be much, much better than it was for them to actually win this game. It seems they walked in just assuming they were going to win because their talent was superior. I think the stretch in the game that stood out to me the most was near the end of the third quarter. Embiid's in foul trouble, and Tari Eason, the number 17 pick in the draft, just takes over the game. I mean, he rips a steal from Tobias Harris. He's slashing in for layups. He's firing up the crowd. And even with Joel Embiid off the court, that is unacceptable for the Sixers from an effort standpoint. I think, sure, Harden having an off night, you can tolerate that. And I think you would expect somewhat of a defensive drop off with him back on the court and not being his sharpest. But much of the problems for the Sixers were in the inexcusable category. And yeah, the minutes, for me, it's just, does he have a minutes restriction or does he not?
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like the Sixers were trying to get the best of both worlds, and they ended up getting the worst possible outcome, which was 38 high intensity minutes for James Harden and no win and very little positive basketball to show for it. So definitely worth monitoring for moving forward with the minutes. I think Doc Rivers was candid last year that he was playing James Harden a little more than he wanted to when he recognized he had to rein the minutes in and be a little more cautious and cognizant of how much this guy's playing. But I think that, again, is a very important issue because you need to avoid re-injury. And just based on the way Harden played last night, I don't think you can automatically assume that at least for the next couple of games, having him on the floor just makes you, an infinitely better team. As you said, Shake Milton and DeAnthony Melton have shown that they are good basketball players who help the Sixers, play really good defense and win some basketball games. So, yeah, I think in all likelihood, this is an aberration for Harden. And we see.
Do you think the time off before the Lakers game with all this, they don't play Lakers till Friday. Do you think that played into, okay, I can play Harden for as many minutes as I feel like works for us to get the win because we have this time off before the next game?
I don't think it really should have. For me, if anything, that situation is decent justification for not playing James Harden if he doesn't feel he's capable of being great. But him and it didn't go especially well. I do think this little stretch before the Lakers game, they will have to review some unpleasant film and have to gain some more clarity about, okay, James is back in the mix. Reintegrating him did not go how we envision. Now let's sort of hammer home what people's roles are now, what sets we feel are most fruitful, how we want to defend, what's our plan A, B, and C. Clearly, some of that shifted, and clearly some of that's fair enough. And the reason they now have to reevaluate in part is because they were good without Harden. They were 8-6 and had the NBA's best defense, but certainly some major adjustments that are now going to be required. And the biggest one is just the effort, the attention to detail needs to be better. James Harden needs to shoot better than 4 for 19 as well.
Yeah, it all comes down to shot making. Sometimes the Sixers could not make shots when they matter most. But we want to inform you that if you're ready to build your career skills in 2023, apply to Wilmington University today and get started by January 9th. Learn more and apply at wilmu.edu. Upskill, reskill, or start fresh in 2023 with a degree or certificate from Wilmington University. WilMU works for you. Apply today to start January 9th. And if you are injured, for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. The Sixers deserve to get a win on this road trip. Lose Memphis. Yeah, they probably didn't get away. They didn't play like it.
So yeah, I mean, when I think deserve, I think meriting a victory, and I don't think they did. Honestly,
they had that one last night. There were times I thought they were about to lose it, and then there was a times when I thought they were going to win the game.
It's something though, because for me, I'm very big on just deserve is super subjective, and the team that scores more points deserve to win. But last night, honestly, it was like Houston deserved that game so much more.
How do you feel about those? Harden. There wasn't one time in any of the overtimes where he pushed the ball up the floor, walks it up every time. They do that soft pick and roll at the top of the key where Joel more inevitably than not just pops and doesn't roll hard to the basket. To me, it's just like he just wants to get the ball in his hands, like Joel just wants to get the ball in his hands. So, just give it to me, basically. Like, whatever this matchup is, whoever's guarding me, just give me the ball, whether it's 15 feet from the basket, 18 feet. Like, there's better ways to get him the ball closer to the basket, or even in a situation where he's going to demand a double team, like him squaring up, 15 feet from the basket and settling for a jump shot. If I'm Houston, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, okay, yeah, he can knock it down, but it's much better than him being 2 feet from the basket and laying the ball up or whatnot. Also, the effort on the rebounding was subpar, which is very frustrating because, he can. And oftentimes it's Joel's man who's getting the offensive rebounds. So what would you make of some of those things?
Yeah, like just in terms of the big picture approach offensively, you could certainly argue that the Sixers would have benefited from a little more creativity, some more wrinkles or misdirection sprinkled in there. But the bottom line was most of the possessions had Joel Embiid catching the ball at the nail against an inferior defender, and often he looked and is really dangerous in those situations. I just think last night he was worse than he usually is. Sure, he drew plenty of fouls and made some of those mid-range jumpers, but in that first overtime has 2 just really poor turnovers.
What was the outlet there? What was he seeing, or is that a typical action? Because I haven't seen him.
Yeah, just him at the nail with guys spaced around him, and it appeared that
goes into the jump shot and then tries to last minute
Mhm.
pass it to the far side of the court.
Right. It looked like on both plays he expected Melton to be in an exact floor spot on the wing, and Melton wasn't exactly in the right place, but I didn't think
That's
Melton it
still,
was
yeah,
Melton doing anything horribly wrong. And like you said, if you rise in the air, it's fair enough for your teammate to think that means you're shooting the ball.
right.
So just a lack of precision and a lack of poise in those meaningful moments. Now, that's not to discount that he was still one of the more efficient Sixers and scored 39 points, but they needed it better in the clutch in this game. And part of that also was he missed 2 crucial free throws. Again, it's in the context of a 14 for 17 game at the foul line, but
And
it is legit to say that Joel Embiid being well less than, well under perfect with his many touches late in games, it hurt here. And, that's just, they're going to live and die with him, I think, for the most part. But he's got sharper and smarter in those moments.
yeah,
I think overall he's improved in that broad category. There's more understanding of where his outlets are. There's a better feel for when he should be super aggressive and just attack his matchup, and when he should be aware of the passing options. But last night it wasn't good enough, and then he fouls out
yeah,
at
the
the end of
lack
the
of,
first overtime. And
yeah,
honestly, I understand him not wanting the Rockets to win the game on a layup and to contest there, but it wasn't like Melton was super far out of the play on Kevin Porter's drive,
it's
and
too aggressive.
Embiid just ends up hacking him with 5 fouls. So again, just in my mind, a little loss of composure there,
Yeah,
and
lack of focus.
just a situation where he really wants to win the game and wants to avoid a bad loss, but that can't bleed into committing your 6th foul for a team that is obviously much worse when you're on the bench.
And at that point, if he just goes straight up, you still get the contest. You
Yeah.
still get your body in between him and the basket, and he's going to have to shoot over you. But once you start dipping your hands over, and Doc Rivers and the Sixers kind of had their hands tied, they had to challenge that. It's like a use it or lose it situation. And if it goes your way, obviously you get to keep Joel in the game. But it's just a lack of composure, lack of focus, lack of awareness, just a basketball IQ thing. In that moment, you can't be that aggressive. And he lost his composure at that time. And you could see him kind of wearing it, on the bench afterward with the sweat dripping down and everything. But you pair that with the turnovers, they obviously need him to be exceptional on both ends of the floor, lack of focus on the defensive end. And it's just all culminated a frustrating night. But on top of that, I think part of it is, okay, Doc Rivers isn't going to call a timeout and set up a play because you got these 2 all-stars in Joel and James Harden. But there's more of a lack of basketball IQ, lack of awareness, because Tobias Harris was the hot hand. He was cooking, and they don't try to get him involved or set him up in the corner or, draw the defense and kick it out to him or just to get a look. You know what I'm saying? Did you feel like with as hot as Tobias was playing and he kind of carried it over from the Memphis game, that they should have tried to incorporate him in the offense?
I understand that point of view. I don't think I buy it a ton because it was a situation where he was getting good shots in the flow of the offense. And then you also have to note when Embiid did foul out of the game and there were called plays for Harris, he didn't produce. He missed a short jumper in the second overtime, missed a little 3 or 4 footer in the lane. So I don't personally identify that as a large reason the Sixers lost or a glaring flaw. I think for me, as far as the way they went about things offensively, it's just it wouldn't have hurt to design some more variety and some more movement, because clearly that was not organically there with James Harden just pounding the ball for 15, 20 seconds. So even more variety in Embiid's touches. I get I get that the look at the nail is generally one you like because it allows him to survey the floor. But hey, let's call a cross five play and get him a post on the left block just to switch things up and to draw a double from that location that maybe, leads to swing, and that's a Tobias Harris 3 or something, call a double drag, call something that actually forces the offense to move the ball
Or the
instead
defense
of,
to commit one way or the other. So
yeah,
a seam or a crease or something opens up,
yeah,
or open man, or through a rotation, swinging the ball, or what have you.
yeah. And realistically, most late game offense is not going to be especially pretty, and more physicality is going to be allowed from the defense, and your stars are going to hold the ball for the majority of possessions. But I think the criticism, both last night and in general, that the Sixers could change things up a tad more is a valid one. And I would certainly like to see that moving forward. I think also with James Mix, as we saw early in the game, it's worth trying more stuff because teams actually have to account for the guards rolling to the rim on these double drags, and they have to be aware that Harden can thread little windows, with his pick and roll passing. That shouldn't all go away late in the game for the Sixers.
Yeah, and I see your point, because with a decision maker like Harden, you want to trust that he's going to find things that other guys wouldn't. And I just think that, part of the fear of the way they were playing, like you mentioned, with this phenomenal defense and a surprising record with Harden and Maxey out, part of the greatness of that time was that a lot of guys were touching the ball. The ball wasn't sticking, it was moving around. But then you have a guy who's ball dominant like Harden, dribbling a lot and things like that. It's not the same movement. It's not the same incorporation of other guys on offense. Obviously, if you think to touch the ball, you move around a little more, you run a little harder, you set screens a little tougher, because you're expecting maybe I'll get a touch off of this or something like that. So something the coaching staff is going to have to figure out. I mean, it's frustrating to have to deal with this, and we are past the quarter point of the season, so kind of the identity thing kind of starts to develop about who this team is and whatnot. But frustrating loss for sure, frustrating road trip for the 76ers. But here on Friday, this dude Anthony Davis, say what you want about him in the past, but over the past couple of games, I think he had 55 against Washington, was showing some serious aggression and toughness. 17 rebounds to go with it. Although Embiid has had some great matchups against Anthony Davis, where he has come out on the higher side of it and dominated Davis to some extent. Um, it's going to be a tall order for him to come off of this road trip and then play this Lakers team that seems to have some renewed energy, particularly coming from that center position and AD, and slow them down. So you'd expect some tougher practices for them here over these next couple of days to try to prepare for that.
I think so. Yeah, I think, like I said, the priority just needs to be greater clarity. And that's what Doc Rivers strives for, but that sure didn't look like a team last night that knew exactly what it wanted to do and how to execute that. Now, a large chunk of that is the foul trouble was so extensive that plan A immediately went out of the window. But to me, a lot of that was the Sixers' own fault. A lot of those were legitimate fouls as a result of undisciplined attempts to force turnovers and struggles keeping the ball in front of them. I think just the defense, bottom line, needs to be so much better, and it can be. I don't think just adding James Harden back into the mix suddenly Sixers a below average defensive team by any means.
He was getting beat a lot, though.
He looked quite rough,
like a guy who hadn't played in a while. Yeah,
indeed, yeah, and that is fair to expect that they won't be as well rounded defensively, and they'll need to be more reliant on switching and what have you. But just so brutal a defensive performance, and they can't really afford to replicate that during the 7-game homestand. I do think, though, for all we went over with the offensive issues last night, James Harden on the court, just year after year, his teams are a lot better offensively. And some of it is stylistic, where him using that rip through move to get 3 free throws, it's not aesthetically pleasing, but that's an extremely efficient possession, right? So I do think that's worth keeping in mind that on the court, both this year and overall, equals better Sixers offense. But yeah, it's equaled worse Sixers defense as well. And that side of the ball, the effort needs to be better. And just the overall performance, the standard can't be what it was last night.
Yeah, statistically, sometimes doesn't always match up with what your eyes are telling you.
Yeah, sure. And I think the point about just team basketball and everyone being involved and pace and ball movement, some of that you can quantify tangibly, right? Like how much are the Sixers playing in transition and fast break points and what have you, but some of it is hard to put your finger on, and it is fair enough, I think, if you certainly have observed this year that James Harden tends to pound the ball in a lot of possessions, and that's just not good for how the Sixers want to be in terms of identity, in terms of their style.
There was one point last night where it took me back to the old Houston Rockets because he had a layup that he passed up to throw it out for. I said, "Oh man, here we go." That really turned my stomach, man. I didn't like seeing that. I mean, it's like you sometimes. I know he doesn't have the explosion and things like that, but he's 6'5", man. Like get in there and nah. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think just downhill driving was obviously disappointing for him last night, and even the mid-range game, which had been a bright spot early in this season, he didn't seem as self-assured for me in that area. It seemed like there was a little more hesitation about, do I take this little 15-footer or do I, throw the ball back out to Embiid? Do I drive all the way to the lane? And yeah, certainly super ineffective as a finisher. Didn't really show the footer at all. So I think the unpredictability was lacking. It felt like most of his threat level was from 3-point range, and none of those signs from last night are things that the Sixers hope carry over. Again, I don't think they will to the extent that was present in this Houston game, but it might take a bit of time for him to quote unquote get back to himself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we want to take a quick time out to let you guys know that opioid addiction is a national public crisis. A Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. And we're here at at Rivers Casino on the 280s and more. Rewind Casino Philadelphia. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Part of the job of the coaching staff is to find a way to keep the pieces that were strong and developed some confidence while Harden was out, incorporated into the flow of the offense, specifically Shake Milton, DeAnthony Melton. George Niang was hurt. He wasn't available last night. Tobias Harris still seems to be able to adapt to pretty much whatever role is available to him, and credit to him for that. How did you feel they did with incorporating, obviously you can't really, Melton is the glue of it all, and he plays both ends. So his time is not really in as much jeopardy as Shake Milton's time. But how did you feel they did incorporate in those guys into the flow with Harden out there?
I thought it was okay. I think we need to see more because the ball through the. But I liked that Shake Milton got a lot of minutes next to James Harden. I think that's deserved, and I think also we know that Milton tends to look good in those situations where he can play off another guard who, has pass, dribble, shoot abilities. And obviously, James Harden is better in that category than DeAnthony Melton on a normal night. So yeah, I thought Milton looked decent. I think definitely the bench suffered without one of its shooters in Niang, and got outplayed by Houston.
Out athletic, out
Definitely,
efforted,
yeah.
the whole nine. A young team is going to bring that. You feel like the veteran savvy and experience would win over, but that was not the case last night. Frustrating to say the least. Are you thinking that the coaching staff is the same frustration, or they did, just 1 out of 82 last night and we'll figure it out, or is there more of an issue, do you think, with the way Harden plays or the way that they play with Harden in the lineup?
Well, I think the individual loss, no doubt.
Yeah, 1 of 82.
Oh, no. I think that's like an especially frustrating loss.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
no question. That is not one that you chalk up to schedule or chalk up to difficult circumstances. Okay.
I felt that way too, so I'm just glad you corroborated that.
I mean, Tyrese Maxey's out, but
that's one you should win, man.
Right. It's an inexcusable loss, both just in terms of on paper and then in terms of what you saw, just getting out hustled for offensive boards, committing a ton of boneheaded fouls and boneheaded turnovers, and having so many opportunities to win the game. If one guy was just a little better or a little sharper or didn't let his man blow by him on the defensive end. So I think overall, though, there's a justifiable expectation that this is not who James Harden is, and that when he is more comfortable and more back in the swing of things, that life will be different for the Sixers. But as I noted, I think the defensive end has to be especially disappointing, and I am sure that the Sixers will be made fully aware of all the mistakes they made there, over the next couple of days.
I'm going to bring some sage to the arena on Friday. Just walk through the arena, a little sage. Just kind of get out all the bad vibes.
The vibes have been really up and down. It's been remarkable how many twists in fortune and morale seemingly the team has had this year. I mean, 12-9 after a win that I think everyone was thrilled against. I guess it was 11-9 against Brooklyn, and then they beat Atlanta
Hawks.
And Joel Embiid returned, and Embiid was awesome down the stretch of that game, in contrast, I think, to this one. So there's clearly been plenty of positives that you can note from this year, but the inability to sustain them is indeed frustrating and certainly partly attributable to rotten injury luck. But last night is one where very clearly they did not lose the game because of injuries. They lost the game because they didn't play as hard as their opponent, and they just didn't do a lot of the basics you have to execute to win in the NBA.
Hopefully some cathartic healing wins are on the way here for the 76ers over this homestand. We will be with you next week with another Sixers Talk podcast. Oh, excuse me. We'll be here Thursday with another Sixers Talk podcast, not next week. But we're building up to this game Friday against the Los Angeles Lakers. But for Noah Levick, Ben Barry, Tom Finer, I'm Danny Pommells. We appreciate you listening to this Sixers Talk, watching to this Talk podcast brought to you by University. Works. We'll see you next time.